Alan Watts' hidden key. Let go and life will flow effortlessly. Have you ever felt like you were swimming upstream in your own life? Like you're constantly trying, striving, forcing outcomes, and yet everything seems to be just out of reach? The peace, the success, the happiness, the meaning. You try to control your thoughts, your emotions, your relationships, even time itself. And still, the more control you attempt to wield, the more life resists you. You burn out, you collapse, you question everything. But what if the problem wasn't your effort? What if the problem was the trying itself? Imagine for a moment that the reason life feels heavy is because we're gripping it too tightly. Now imagine that letting go, not in a careless way, but in a deeply conscious, trusting way, was the secret to everything flowing freely again. That's the idea Alan Watts devoted his life to revealing. And it's not just an idea, it's a key. A hidden key. Today, I'm inviting you to try it in your own mind. For just a few minutes, let go. Not of your goals, not of your dreams, but of the internal grip, the mental tension, the belief that you are the one controlling the ride. Because here's the paradox. The moment you stop trying to force life to happen, life begins to unfold in ways you couldn't imagine. Alan Watts once said, "The harder you try to swim, the more you sink. But if you just relax, you float." At first glance, that sounds poetic and vague, but when you live it, when you feel it, you realize it's one of the most practical truths ever spoken. Because most of us are not living, we're managing. We're scheduling, optimizing, worrying, overthinking. We've become obsessed with outcomes, addicted to control, and in that process we've lost our ability to simply be. To trust that maybe, just maybe, the universe doesn't need micromanaging. That maybe the same intelligence that grows trees, moves the tides, and ignites stars in distant galaxies also flows through you. And if that's true, then trying to control every outcome becomes like yelling instructions at a river. It's not just pointless, it's exhausting.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
But how did we get here? Why do we cling so tightly to control, even when it makes us miserable? It's because we were taught that to let go is to be weak. Society says that surrender is failure, that trust is naive, that the only way to succeed is to grind, to hustle, to dominate every second of our lives. But Watts asked us to question that. He asked, what if life is not a problem to be solved, but an experience to be enjoyed? That single shift in perspective changes everything, because suddenly you stop treating life like a war and start treating it like a dance. You stop trying to win and start trying to feel. And in that shift, you begin to notice something strange and miraculous. Life starts to work. Not because you controlled it, but because you got out of the way. Let's bring this down to something real. Have you ever tried to remember a name or a word, and the harder you try, the further it slips from your mind? But then later, when you've stopped trying, boom, it appears. That's not a fluke, that's a pattern. The conscious mind is a brilliant tool, but it's not designed for brute force. It's designed for clarity, for awareness, for play. When we relax, when we trust, we access deeper layers of intelligence, what some call intuition or flow or grace. And that's when life begins to surprise us. That's when synchronicities happen. That's when people appear, opportunities unfold, ideas drop in seemingly from nowhere. Not because we forced them, but because we aligned ourselves with the natural rhythm of existence. And still the ego resists. It says, "But what if I lose control?" And the answer, of course, is, you were never in control to begin with. That's the great cosmic joke. You didn't control your birth. You don't control your heartbeat. You don't control the sunrise, the weather, the thoughts that pop into your head. So why do we cling to this illusion that we are the masters of reality? We are participants, not puppeteers. And when we finally stop pretending to be in charge, we begin to feel something we've been missing our entire lives: peace. But here's where things get really interesting. Letting go isn't just about inner peace. It's also about power. Real power. Not the power to dominate, but the power to move with the current of life. When you let go of resistance, you become like water, adaptable, flowing, unstoppable. It's not passivity, it's presence. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. Imagine a surfer trying to fight the wave versus one who rides it. Same wave, different relationship. One leads to struggle, the other leads to flow. So, I want to ask you something that might shake the foundation of how you live. What are you holding on to that's keeping you from flowing? A belief, a fear, a need to control how others see you? What would happen, really happen, if you loosened your grip just a little? Not because you're giving up, but because you're waking up. Waking up to the possibility that life wants to carry you if only you'd stop kicking against the current. We're only beginning to scratch the surface of what it means to let go. This isn't just a cute idea. It's a radical shift in how we relate to everything. And in the next part, we're going to dive even deeper, because there's something even more mind-blowing than letting go of control, and that's realizing you never had it in the first place. The illusion of control. Why you're not the one steering the ship. Let's go deeper now, into the territory where the ego gets nervous, where the mind starts to pull back because it's approaching a truth that threatens its entire narrative. And that truth is this: you are not in control of your life in the way you believe. What feels like control is often just a sophisticated illusion, a psychological sleight of hand, a trick of language and thought that convinces us we are the central command center of everything that happens. But if you slow down and pay attention, really pay attention, you'll start to see it. You'll begin to notice that thoughts arise on their own. Emotions appear like weather systems. Events unfold with a complexity that no amount of planning could account for. And yet, we walk through life with this strange idea that we are the ones driving the car. Alan Watts didn't say this to insult us or remove our sense of agency. He said it to free us, because the belief that you are in control is not just false. It's exhausting. It creates a kind of perpetual anxiety, a low-grade terror that if you stop paying attention for even a second, everything will collapse. But who told you that? Where did that belief come from? Look closely and you'll see it's not yours. It was handed down to you by culture, by education, by generations of people who themselves were afraid. And fear loves control. Fear feeds on the illusion that if we just do everything right, nothing bad will happen. But what does life show us again and again? That no matter how careful we are, things still fall apart, plans still go sideways, people still leave, bodies still age, and no amount of control can stop the tide from coming in. So what's the alternative? Do we just throw up our hands and say, fine, I give up? Not exactly. The alternative is presence. The alternative is awakening to the fact that life is happening through you, not just to you or by you. That you are not the separate doer of deeds, but the aware witness in which all of this is playing out. That doesn't mean you're powerless. It means your power is not in control, it's in alignment. When you stop trying to steer the ship and instead become deeply attuned to the ocean you're sailing on, something miraculous happens. You begin to sense where the wind is blowing. You feel when to adjust your sails. You stop fighting the current and start moving with it. And suddenly, life doesn't feel so heavy. It begins to feel like a dance again, like something alive and intelligent that you're part of, not apart from. Now, I know this sounds abstract, but let's ground it. Think of a time you tried to force something in your life. A relationship, a career move, a decision you were sure had to go a certain way. Think about how tight you felt, the mental loops, the overanalysis, the way your body contracted. Now think about a time when something just clicked, when the right opportunity appeared without effort, when you met someone by chance and it changed everything, when you followed a gut feeling and it led you to exactly where you needed to be. Those aren't fairy tales. That's what happens when you loosen your grip, when you realize you're not the puppet master. You're the participant in a much larger, more mysterious process. Watts compared it to music. He said, we don't listen to music to get to the end of the song. We don't dance to arrive at a final step. We do it for the experience itself. But we treat life like a task list, a sequence of objectives, a journey to some imagined destination where we'll finally be okay. And because of that mindset, we miss the very thing we're seeking. We miss now. We miss the richness of the moment because we're too busy trying to control what comes next. But here's the twist. Letting go of control doesn't mean chaos. It doesn't mean you stop making choices or caring about your life. It means you stop pretending that your choices are the sole cause of what unfolds. It means you start dancing with life instead of dragging it behind you. You still move, you still act, you still dream, but you do it from a place of trust, not tension. You do it from a place of flow, not fear. So ask yourself this. What are you trying to control right now that you don't actually control? A person's opinion, a future outcome, your reputation, your emotions? What would it feel like to just stop? To release the need to manipulate it all and simply be with what is? Not because you're passive, not because you don't care, but because you finally understand that your job was never to control the ocean, your job was to surf it. This is the hidden wisdom Alan Watts was always pointing toward. It's not about giving up, it's about waking up. It's about realizing that life in its deep intelligence knows how to move, if only we'd stop interrupting it. So the next time you're caught in the grip of trying to figure it all out, remember this: you're not steering the ship, but you're still on the journey. And that means you can relax, you can pay attention, you can let go, not into nothing, but into everything. The secret language of nature, what flow teaches us about life's deeper intelligence. If we want to truly understand what it means to let go and flow with life, we need to look beyond the walls of our own thoughts. We need to look at nature, because nature doesn't force, it doesn't strive, it simply is, and somehow everything gets done. Trees don't try to grow, they grow. Rivers don't push water forward, they simply are movement itself. Birds don't anxiously rehearse their songs, they sing because it's their nature to sing. And yet, we human beings, perhaps the most intelligent species on this planet, are the only ones who seem to live in constant resistance to the flow of existence. We think we can outsmart nature, outmaneuver uncertainty, and outcontrol chaos. But what if the very intelligence we've been seeking has been in front of us all along, quietly humming in the background of every moment? Alan Watts often spoke of the Tao, the ancient Chinese concept that points to the natural way of things, the underlying flow of the universe. The Tao doesn't scream, it doesn't demand, it whispers, and only those who are quiet enough to listen can hear it. Watts described it not as a force you can grasp or define, but as a rhythm you can feel. And when you begin to live in harmony with that rhythm, life stops being a sequence of problems to solve and starts becoming a dance of interconnected moments. The question is, are you listening? Or are you too busy trying to make the music obey your own tune? Let's bring it back to you, your life, your reality. Have you ever noticed how sometimes when you stop obsessing over a solution, the answer just appears? Or how when you finally surrender a toxic relationship, the right person shows up? Or when you stop chasing success, you suddenly become magnetic to opportunities? These aren't coincidences, they're the subtle signatures of flow. And what's fascinating is that flow doesn't just feel good, it works. It's effective because it's aligned with how life actually moves, not in straight lines, not through force, but through presence, awareness, and surrender. But we've been conditioned otherwise. We're taught that nature is something to be conquered, not collaborated with. We build our cities by tearing down forests, damming rivers, flattening mountains, as if mastery means domination. But when we dominate, we disconnect. And when we disconnect, we suffer. Look at the anxiety epidemic, the burnout culture, the chronic dissatisfaction that haunts even the most successful people. What are we all running from or toward? We've forgotten how to trust the intelligence of life. We've forgotten that we are nature, not separate from it. And so we try to live like machines in a world made of poetry. Watts warned us about this. He said, "You are the universe experiencing itself, not observing it from the outside, experiencing it from within." That means the same intelligence that guides the seasons, the tides, the migration of birds, and the blooming of flowers. It's in you. It is you. So when you let go, you're not falling into chaos, you're falling into harmony, into the same current that moves everything else in this universe with elegance and grace. Let's look at something simple, your breath. You don't control it, not really. It happens. You can pay attention to it, you can direct it for a moment, but most of the time, it breathes you. It's a perfect metaphor for life. When you try to hold your breath, when you resist, pain follows. But when you let it flow, peace returns. Now imagine living your entire life like that, not held tight in the grip of fear and control, but open, trusting, flowing. Or what might you discover about yourself if you live that way? And here's something profound to consider. What if the reason you feel stuck is because you're resisting the very current that's trying to carry you forward? What if your suffering isn't a punishment, but a signal, a sign that you're gripping too tightly to something that was never yours to hold? An outcome, a belief, a version of yourself that no longer fits. Nature doesn't cling. Trees let go of their leaves when the season calls for it. Rivers change course. Animals shed skins, migrate, evolve. Letting go isn't failure, it's participation in the grand unfolding of life. And perhaps the most radical thought of all, what if you don't have to figure it all out? What if life isn't a puzzle, but a process? What if your job is not to solve the mystery, but to live it? That's what flow teaches us. To trust the moment. To act not from fear, but from alignment. To stop chasing and start listening. To our bodies, our intuition, our hearts, and yes, even nature itself. When we do that, something extraordinary happens. Life begins to feel lighter. Not because the circumstances change, but because we change. We move from resistance to receptivity, from control to connection, from fear to flow. And in that space, life doesn't just happen, it blossoms. Not because we forced it to, but because we finally allowed it to. So take a moment now and ask yourself with all sincerity, where in my life am I swimming against the current? And what would happen if I stopped? Not to give up, but to give in to the deeper intelligence that's always been there, patiently waiting for you to notice. The final leap, why letting go isn't the end, it's a beginning of real freedom. This is where everything comes together. The illusion of control, the wisdom of nature, the quiet intelligence of the present moment, they've all been guiding us toward the same realization, the same threshold, and now we stand at the edge of it, the final leap. The moment where letting go stops being a concept and becomes a lived truth. But this is also the place where fear grows loudest, because to the mind, to the ego, letting go feels like dying. It feels like surrendering the last piece of certainty we have, the last illusion we've clung to for safety. But what if that's exactly the point? What if in letting go, we don't lose ourselves, we finally meet ourselves? Alan Watts once said, "To let go of yourself, to let go of the ego, is to become the universe." That's not metaphor. That's not poetic fancy. That's an invitation. To drop the idea that you are a separate, isolated self struggling in a hostile universe, and to begin living as if you are part of the great flow of life itself. Because you are. You always have been. The only thing that ever separated you from that truth was thought. The constant, buzzing narrative that told you you had to fight, to win, to prove, to control. But now you know better. You've seen what happens when you stop grasping, when you allow, when you trust. Real freedom isn't found in having control, it's found in not needing it. It's the kind of freedom that comes when you realize you are not your achievements, not your failures, not your story, not even your body. You are the awareness behind all of it, the quiet watcher, the one who experiences, who feels, who loves, who lets go. That's not weakness, that's power. That's the kind of strength that can't be taken away, because it doesn't depend on outcome. It doesn't depend on winning, it simply is. And when you touch that space, when you live from it, life starts to feel like a miracle again, not because everything is perfect, but because you no longer need it to be. You stop measuring your worth by external markers. You stop needing validation from the world. You begin to flow, not just with life, but as life. You stop seeing yourself as something separate from the world, and you begin to feel deeply and truly that you are the world in motion, that you are the sky and the sea and the breath and the moment, and in that knowing, you are free. But don't take my word for it. Don't believe this because it sounds nice. Live it. Try it. Right now, in this very moment, stop trying to control your experience. Just for a few seconds, let go of the mental grip. Let go of needing to know what's next. Let go of needing to be someone. Just be. Breathe. Feel. Observe. Let life move through you without resistance. That's it. That's the practice. That's the key. It's not about changing your entire life overnight. It's about micro-momentums of surrender practiced daily until they become your natural state. The irony? When you let go, when you surrender to the flow, life often gives you more than you ever imagined. Not because you manipulated it, but because you became available to it. You created space for joy, for connection, for wisdom, for synchronicity. You stopped blocking the current, and suddenly the current carried you somewhere beautiful, somewhere unexpected, somewhere true. So here's the final question I'll leave you with, the one that might haunt you in the best possible way. If you stopped trying to be someone, who would you become? Let that question echo in your mind. Let it disrupt your patterns. Let it wake you up. Because in the end, letting go isn't about losing control. It's about discovering that you were never separate to begin with, that life was never against you, that it was always inviting you to dance, to trust, to flow. All you had to do was say yes. This is Alan Watts' hidden key, not a philosophy to be studied, but a truth to be lived. Let go, and life will flow effortlessly.